Tonight, all eyes on Johnson & Johnson.
This is a 1 in a million kind of risk.
The emergency meeting over resuming the J&J immunization shots as the race between the virus and the vaccine continues.
This as faith leaders push the U.S. to tie Iran nuclear talks to freeing Americans detained by the regime.
The Iranian regime is the worst human rights violator in the world.
And free money.
The government is providing a basic level of income.
Guaranteed income with no strings attached, already paid out in some cities.
Plus, this morning's historic launch. SpaceX sends 4 more astronauts roaring to the International Space Station. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. $9 million COVID-19 vaccine doses ready to go once approved. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening. I'm John Jessup. With today's decision, can Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine still be seen as a viable option for people willing to get the shot?
It's a critical question in the race against a new surge of the virus and a 10-day pause after a handful of cases involving rare blood clots. We're learning more about the background of today's panel review, and for that, we turn to CBN News senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener. Tara?
John and Jenna, U.S. health officials are concerned about the vaccine after 6 women developed blood clots after getting it. A green light means vaccinations could resume within days.
A key moment in the fight against coronavirus.
I'm very much hoping that we will come forward with a really positive sense here of how this vaccine can save lives.
As an advisory panel decides whether the U.S. should keep using the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. Health experts discover AstraZeneca's vaccine, used in Europe until last week, may also be linked to very rare and serious clots.
Tends to occur more frequently in women than men by about a 2-to-1 ratio.
18-year-old Emma Berkey struggled with them after getting the shot. Still, doctors say it's not clear if the vaccine caused the problem.
Her condition is improving day by day. It's going to be long, it's going to be slow, and it's going to be incremental.
A decision on the vaccine's fate comes as the number of COVID cases nationwide slows.
Our average 7 days is going down 62,500 per day. This is a 10% drop in average cases from the prior week and a hopeful trend.
But health experts are concerned the number of people getting the vaccine is falling, even as they become more available.
When 16 and older opened, which we opened 2 weeks ago, I did expect a rush, and it never materialized.
The daily average now falling below 3 million doses a day. Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is an important tool in fighting the virus because it's a single shot.
I do think that there's plenty of people who are interested in the J&J vaccine, if just for convenience, as well as for a single dose option.
Meantime, the CDC says it is again reviewing mask guidelines, saying there could be changes after reports of COVID cases after getting the vaccine. John and Jenna.
All right, Tara Mergener, thank you. And overseas tonight, nuclear talks with Iran. The Biden administration signaling its willingness to lift some sanctions.
Meanwhile, human rights activists say the United States shouldn't give an inch. CBN senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon explains.
Crippling sanctions imposed by President Trump have catapulted Iran's economy into a deep recession. Now, with the Islamic regime on its financial knees, Christian and political leaders say it's time to demand Iran release American hostages and come clean on its egregious human rights abuses.
Simply reinstating the original nuclear deal will put the world in grave danger, says Reverend Johnny Moore, speaking as a human rights activist.
The Iranians were cheating on the deal from the very beginning. They took $150 billion the United States gave to them, and they used it to fund terrorist activity around the world.
He also serves on the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom, which recommends the U.S. raise religious freedom and other human rights abuses in any discussions with Iran. Moore goes even further. I'm appalled by reports that certain Biden administration officials would, in effect, reward Iran for its bad behavior by eliminating sanctions prematurely. Negotiations with Iran must involve the release of arbitrarily detained Americans and address Iran's gross human rights abuses. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the Biden administration has communicated with Tehran over Americans languishing in Iranian prisons, but there's no indication they've been raised as part of a new nuclear deal. Wang Shuwang, an American who spent 3 years detained in Iran, tweets, Biden officials should explain to American hostages' families if the U.S. negotiation team is talking about our hostages in Vienna. Biden's Iran policy appears self-righteous and lacks a moral compass. Legislation introduced in both houses of Congress opposes lifting sanctions without addressing the full scope of Iran's malign activities, including hostage-taking and gross human rights violations. And a letter signed by bipartisan lawmakers asked the White House to address Iran's full range of threats.
And we do not allow the United States government to fall into the arms of an Islamist regime that wants to take over the entire world, kill every American they can, destroy the state of Israel. That cannot happen on our watch.
No doubt many Americans will be watching intently. Negotiators are expected to restart talks in Vienna early next week. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thanks, Jennifer. Here with us now for more is Michael O'Hanlon, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Michael, welcome. This idea of tying nuclear talks to the release of American detainees, how likely is a deal?
Hi, Jenna. I think that's too ambitious because we are going to have a hard enough time making that nuclear deal tighter. I've never been very happy with the nuclear deal because it only had a 10-year time horizon for most of its restrictions. And as you know, that 10 years is already 6 years in. So I do think that some Republican critics of that deal have been right to say we want to extend those time horizons. But if you try to get everything into the deal and right every wrong with Iranian behavior today, I think you're just guaranteed not to have any progress at all. So I would use different sanctions for different things. I find it very, very inspiring to hear the words about the importance of human rights in Iran, and I hope the faith communities and others in the United States keep that refrain up. It's a key element of our overall relationship, and we cannot tolerate human rights abuses of the type that we have often seen from Iran. But it doesn't mean that you expect one deal to cover everything. So I would break down the sanctions. Some are more about the nuclear issue. Some are more about regional behavior. Some are more about human rights.
Michael, as you well know, Iran is accusing Israel of sabotaging its main nuclear facility after last week, and it is now increasing its uranium enrichment, vowing they can go to 90% weapons-grade uranium. The 2015 nuclear deal restricts enrichment to less than 4%. So, Michael, does it seem like the Biden administration is trying to re-enter the nuclear agreement at all costs?
Well, are inclined to re-enter the agreement, and they've been criticized by the left for not simply doing so because, as you know, it was the Trump administration that pulled out. And until that time, if I could challenge one of the earlier comments from one of your other guests, until that time, Iran was in pretty good compliance with its nuclear obligations. It was still behaving terribly in other ways for its behavior in the broader region, for some of the human rights issues that you mentioned. But it was the United States that broke its nuclear obligations first. And therefore, some people say we should make amends. That's the nature of a deal. I, however, would like to find a little tougher nuclear deal that has a longer-term time horizon. And so my hope is the Biden administration is trying to feel its way towards that as well. But I can't predict because the Biden administration has been a little bit tough to read. And frankly, that may be good negotiation policy. If you and I knew exactly what they were trying to do, the Iranians would know as well. So I'm going to hold out hope that they're actually being clever and trying to get a longer duration nuclear deal in exchange for a partial lifting of sanctions.
Wow. Michael, regarding Afghanistan, President Biden is ending America's longest war, announcing a symbolic pullout date of all American troops this September 11th. What do you think? Is that too soon?
Yes. It has turned me give some leeway and some support to the Biden team on Iran. I do not give them any support on Afghanistan. I think the pullout over the next few months is a big mistake. Sure, Americans are frustrated by this war, but we had reduced our military footprint by more than 95% from the days when General Petraeus and General McChrystal and General Allen were engaged in that effort. And the amount of force we have now, I think, is sustainable. And without that kind of backstop to the Afghan government, the peace talks with the Taliban have virtually no chance of success, and I think the civil war will get much worse. So on this issue, I do not agree with President Biden.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institution.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, picture day at the Supreme Court. Why some Democrats want to change this picture.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Picture day at the U.S. Supreme Court. Today, the 9 justices took their annual group photo. New to the group this year, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was sworn in back in October. This year's picture comes amid a push by Democrats to expand the High Court from 9 to 13 justices. House Democrats unveiling a bill to pack the Marble Palace this week after President Biden's appointment of a White House commission to look into court reform.
Well, Democrats are reviving the Green New Deal this week, unveiling an update from last year. This time around, though, they have control of both the House and the Senate.
We refuse to allow, for example, an economy that goes from oil barons to solar barons. That's what we're not going to do. Because what we're going to do is that we're going to transition to a 100% carbon-free economy that is more unionized, more just, more dignified, and guarantees more health care and housing than we ever have before.
Well, joining us now for our Friday Faith Nation panel, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill, and CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. Welcome to you both. The Green New Deal, let's just start there. 2.0 calls for a fundamental reshaping of the economy. Republicans, though, criticize it as radical socialism. The redux comes amid a big climate push from the White House. Julia, does this sort of legislation serve to potentially turn away moderates?
It very well could turn away moderates, especially in those very crucial swing states that we'll be looking at in 2022, states where there might be Democrats like Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia. However, they're not nearly as progressive as some of the creators of the Green New Deal, i.e. Senator Ed Markey and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So this absolutely puts those moderate Democratic senators and Congress lawmakers in a very difficult position.
So President Biden is set to make his first overseas trip to visit the UK and Belgium in June. David, this question to you, does this trip signal that the world is opening up again post-COVID? And can Americans then start visiting some of these countries soon, too?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's for sure. I don't think there's a question about it that Biden's finally actually taking that trip. And so therefore, that's a signal, I think, in a way that things are starting to get back to normal. I think what's going to be interesting in this trip, though, is it going to be the I'm sorry about Donald Trump tour? You know, he'll go to the G7 over there in the UK. And what is he going to do? Go to every single leader down the line going, look, I'm sorry about Trump. I'm really sorry about Trump. Sorry about Trump. Let me give you your 2% back that we took from you for the last 4 years or so. So, it'll be interesting to see if this is kind of a semi-apology tour as well.
Well, a rare moment of bipartisanship, the Senate approving the anti-Asian hate crimes bill. David, are there any other areas right now where bipartisan compromise might be possible?
Well, not 94-1 unless they're renaming a post office. I mean, no. 94-1 on this bill, which is obviously very impressive. And you know why it was impressive? Because there really wasn't anything controversial here. They're going to appoint someone at the Justice Department, create a position to oversee Asian hate crimes, some more funding as well, and anti-hate crimes hotline, and a few other things. The point simply is that there was nothing controversial about this at all. But you get into immigration, many other issues, and then it's a whole another ball of wax.
Yeah, on police reform, on that particular issue, Julia, is there any room for compromise, or are both sides pretty much dug in?
Potentially there's room for compromise. Actually, Republicans and Democrats, when you look at the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, they're probably in agreement on a good part of it. However, it's that issue of qualified immunity, whether there can be civil investigations opened into police, after an incident is reported. That's going to be a major sticking point. We know that Republicans, if qualified immunity is taken away under this legislation, they're not going to step on. However, we do know that Senator Tim Scott, who is the only African-American Republican senator, and he's also giving the response to President Biden's joint address to Congress next week, he is talking with Senator Cory Booker about a potential compromise bill. So there definitely is room. However, right now we don't know what that legislation will look like.
Yeah. Well, we'll hope for some bipartisan compromise here, but who knows? To be determined. All right, David Brody, Julia Manchester, good to see you both. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
You too.
When we come back, a look at the cities already putting the idea of universal basic income with money from the government into action.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
Well, free money with no strings attached. The mayor of Los Angeles is considering a $24 million guaranteed basic income program for low-income families.
And he's not the only one. 25 mayors across the country are already giving away cash payments each month to their low-income populations. CBN's Caitlin Burke looks at the potential impact if this becomes a national policy.
COVID's 1-2 punch basically devastated the city of Chelsea, Massachusetts, in terms of infection rates and unemployment.
We have lots of undocumented workers, so many of them lost their hours, lost their jobs, and they were not entitled to any kind of government assistance.
The city tried running a food pantry, but found it wasn't the most efficient way to help needy residents. Then, city leaders launched Chelsea Eats, a guaranteed income pilot program. Through a lottery, 2,074 low-income families were selected to receive a Visa debit card loaded with $200 to $400 a month, depending on the size of the family. Chelsea isn't the first city to explore this kind of program. In fact, more than 25 mayors are all running similar pilots. They're part of a coalition called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income.
We strongly believe just because someone is poor does not mean they're irresponsible, and the data bears that out. 99+% of the expenditures on these cards are for food and necessities. There's very little frivolous spending.
A 2-year guaranteed income pilot program in Stockton, California, became the catalyst for this current wave. A study found the Stockton program led to a reduction of month-to-month income fluctuations, increased recipients' full-time employment, and decreased feelings of anxiety and depression. Each of the current pilot programs are also under the microscope as researchers from places like Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania try to determine if these experiments could ultimately lead to federal policy.
To me, it's good that these efforts are going on. I think we need to be careful in evaluating them. And it's certainly better that those things happen on a small scale before we have national policy.
Matt Weidinger, a research fellow in poverty studies at the American Enterprise Institute, says a key question for any basic income program is who pays for it. The current programs, like Chelsea Eats, have private donors. That wouldn't be the case, however, if this becomes a national policy.
If you're talking about expanding benefits, you're increasing spending and you're really increasing taxes. And you're mostly increasing taxes on people in the future, which includes today's children and young workers.
Brandon Arnold of the National Taxpayers Union believes some sort of federal guaranteed income program could be economically feasible if it were to replace one or more of the welfare programs already in place.
Removing some programs that have improper payment rates of 25, 30% that simply aren't functioning the way that they ought to be. Removing programs that have things like marriage penalties that hold people back for trying to just get wed like a lot of Americans would like to. Those programs need to be reevaluated, reformed, and improved, and perhaps replaced with something like a universal benefit program that pertains only to people that are in need of it.
Weidinger and Arnold stress that the key is focusing on people who need financial assistance, which isn't what they're seeing from Washington. Under the banner of pandemic relief, Democrats have launched an experiment of their own, providing universal checks to parents. This type of initiative is known as Universal Basic Income.
Universal Basic Income is essentially a program where the government is providing a basic level of income to each and every citizen in the country.
As part of the latest COVID stimulus, this is promoted as a new child tax credit, with checks going to parents of children over the age of 18.
It is a guaranteed check regardless of whether parents are working or not. And that's quite different from the make work pay system that has evolved over the past generation or so.
While this new benefit is only covered for a year, the White House and congressional Democrats want the policy to be made permanent. Weidinger says once Universal Basic Income, or UBI, is made available for parents, everyone else will want a piece of the action.
UBI for parents could easily be followed by UBI for childless adults. And then, of course, some policymakers have proposed far bigger payments per month than the $300 that's contemplated in this.
Some of those potential policymakers include Vice President Kamala Harris, who as a senator last year introduced legislation calling for monthly pandemic payments of $2,000 to each adult and up to 3 children in the household. Former presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who's now running for New York mayor, pitched $1,000 monthly checks for every American adult, no matter their income.
We're going to find ourselves, if some of these things are made permanent, with a much bigger federal government, it's getting much more expensive. And right now we're kind of wishing away those long-term costs, but those long-term costs are, not inconsequential, and they certainly are not unreal.
The idea of any sort of guaranteed income was once considered radical, but these programs suggest a potential shift in the way the U.S. approaches alleviating poverty. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thank you, Caitlin. Coming up, a crew unlike any other. The SpaceX Crew Dragon manages a successful launch.
It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Wednesday at 3 on the CBN News Channel. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
And finally tonight, NASA's SpaceX Crew Dragon bound for the International Space Station after this morning's successful launch with 4 astronauts on board.
Yeah, this is the 3rd mission to space for the SpaceX Crew Dragon. Astronaut Megan MacArthur is the pilot. Last time it was her husband who's on board again this time too.
Endeavour launches once again. 4 astronauts from 3 countries on Crew 2, now making their way to the one and only International Space Station.
Last year, the SpaceX Crew Dragon made history with its first flight, marking the first human flight in a commercial United States spacecraft. The crew is expected to land at the International Space Station early tomorrow morning.
Cool launch off.
All right, that does it for Faith Nation. Have a great weekend, everybody.
See you again next time.